and welcome back to Kobayashi Island. This is a series where I'm building a large Japanese-themed city and trying to find a balance between detailing and building quickly. My goal for the city and the surrounding area is to be pretty big, with a downtown and old town, a rural area with farms, harbor, airport, and all these different places, and make them look as realistic as I can, but not spend too much time on any one thing. I don't really want to be working on this project for a decade, and I'm not trying to kill my computer, so I'm not going crazy with the detailing. I'm attempting to avoid placing lots and lots and lots of props or decals or making crazy intersections or anything that's hyper detailed and time consuming. I want a city where you can look at it from a medium or far distance and think, wow, that looks so real. But when you zoom in, you start to notice that the details aren't 100% there, and that's basically just to get more done quickly. Last few episodes, I've been expanding out from Old Town, starting to transition from the dense city center to the more rural parts of the island. And this episode isn't really much different. What I'm going to be working on today is an area between the freeway and the lower part of the Kobayashi Reservoir, an area that up until this point I've been avoiding and have had a difficult time figuring out exactly what to do with. I had a number of ideas, including a large retail store like a Costco or an IKEA, or apartment complexes or industrial buildings, or even like a swamp. But what ended up happening wasn't exactly any of that. I started off by just placing down a few of the more industrial-looking Industries DLC farming assets, just to sort of boost the farming area because I really want to be producing a lot of crops. So a greenhouse, a milking parlor, and towards the end of the episode, another flour mill. This was kind of just an obvious thing that I needed more of in this area before it gets too rural, and building some farming stuff right off the bat really helped me figure out what else could go here. After placing down the greenhouse, I had a little area right next to the freeway off-ramp left. To me, the only obvious thing to put there was a gas station, because usually there's a gas station right when you get off the freeway. I did some cool elevation changes between the greenhouse and the gas station where I used the simple pavement road to keep the terrain lowered down on the gas station side, and then used the Traffic Manager Presidential Edition mod to prevent cars from parking or driving on that road. And then finally, I used some retaining walls to create a wall that separates the elevation and ploppable asphalt up above to create a car park area. After building these two things, I was left with this little area of grass that was almost too small to put anything in. If we were closer to the city center, I would have grabbed my smallest commercial buildings and tried to fill up the space as best as I could. But because we're now leaving the city, I decided that I would put up a chain link fence and just fill the area with trees and shrubs, sort of like an empty lot or just some unused space. Next, I was thinking that this area could actually use a little more commercial because I don't really think I'll have much more opportunity to put down shops and stuff as I get further from the city. Plus, it helps with land value, which I've been struggling with. So I found an office-looking commercial building as well as another smaller hand car wash building and placed those down along the main road with just a little bit of detail. Some planter curbs, a fence, and some oil stain decals for soapy water at the car wash. It occurred to me that I hadn't placed down any road maintenance buildings in Kobayashi Island yet, and this was probably a good place to do it since we're still relatively close to downtown. So that was the next thing I did, along with a gated parking area for trucks and cherry pickers and stuff they might use for maintaining the city. One of the next things I did was place down two Industries DLC warehouses, one for flour and one for animal products. I did do a little fun thing when I made these. They're at different heights. So I used a metal stairway prop to make a quick connection between the two so that it looks like they're the same warehouse, but one is like the upper section and one is the lower section. I kind of like the way that turned out. So I'm going to leave you guys for a second, just play some music, and I'll be back in a bit. The thing I was having the hardest time trying to figure out with this area was what to do along the water. It seemed like an area that has some land value because of the shoreline, the view across the water to the city, and how close it was to the old town and the downtown. So apartment buildings seemed like the obvious choice, but as I was placing them down, trying to see how they looked, it just made no sense to me. There shouldn't be a lot of people living here. It's right between the dam's electrical area and a bunch of industrial buildings. So it really felt like a light bulb went off in my head when I realized that what needed to go here was a big park along the water. Makes a lot of sense to me because I feel like oftentimes parks are in these kind of somewhat undesirable areas. I just feel like it's a classic sort of thing where there's a park right next to a power plant or a freeway or an airport or just anywhere where there's a lot of space, but no one really wants to live there. So this area really fits that bill. There's a power plant on one side, train tracks on the other, and industrial buildings just beyond that. What I did with this park, which I thought turned out really awesome, was I built my own baseball diamond. Baseball is obviously a big thing in Japan, so I thought it would definitely make sense to have a baseball field here. I have a couple of baseball diamond park assets from the workshop, but I don't really like how intensely green the grass is for them, so what I decided to do here was place down some different height fences for the area behind home plate, and then for the dugout and the fence along the foul ball line, and then use the surface painter tool to draw a square for the base line and the pitcher's mound. I put down some benches and trash cans in the dugout and finally used the prop line tool to make a home run fence using these Japanese signs. I really like the way this turned out. I may end up even removing the baseball diamond assets I'm subscribed to and just doing them all like this in the future. It might take a minute or two longer to make, but looks so much more realistic and blends in with the rest of the grass on the map, as opposed to these hyper green fields from the workshop. The last thing I did this episode was play around with the canals that I'm going to be using all around the farming area. Like I said last episode, I want these canals to feel sort of disjointed, sometimes having grassy wide banks and other times having concrete sides and be really skinny. There's going to be farms on either side of the canals for the most part, and farms kind of conform to the ground elevation, unlike other buildings. So it took me quite a while to figure out how to make these concrete-sided banks and get the farms right up against them without the farms slipping away as the ground lowers underneath. I knew that for the walls of the concrete canals, I wanted to use the dock walls, which are an awesome asset and pair really well with ploppable pavement and ploppable grass and gravel. The gravel really seemed to make the most sense here since the dirt around the canals is pretty dark and not super green. But when I moved the farms right up against the dock walls, since the ploppable gravel is hiding the terrain sloping away underneath, the farms were just sinking into the ground and not getting close to the edge. My next thought was to try and cover this area with shrubs and trees, but that also had its own problems since the ploppable gravel is directly above the shore of the canal, so there's literally water right underneath it. When trees are too close or right on top of water, they end up dying and becoming see-through, so that wasn't going to work either. What I ended up doing was downloading this mod by Bloody Penguin called No Radioactive Desert, which I used to have, but got rid of because I thought that the Hide It mod did all the same things, but apparently it doesn't. The Hide It mod is great. It allows you to hide things like ferry path buoys or the yellow tint from pollution of industrial buildings or even UI elements, but you actually need the radioactive desert mod in order to fix this one problem of trees dying when they're too close to water. So I got that and it ended up working great. I placed down a bunch of grass and bushes on top of the ploppable pavement next to the concrete walls. And because of the mod, they're lush and green and really help to cover up the shore of the canals and make them look skinnier. So that's about it for this episode. I think at this point, I have a really good idea of how the farming areas are going to look. And I think the main challenge going forward in this area is going to be figuring out cool, unique things to make in each individual part of the farming area. I think this episode, I sort of failed at that. There's not one specific thing that really stands out to me as the centerpiece of this area. But on the bright side, doing this episode did help me solve two big problems I was struggling with. What to do with the area along the water where the park went, and how to make the canals look good with concrete walls. If you have any suggestions of fun things to build in this farming area further out from the city, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your suggestions. Next episode will be a fun change of pace, something really out of left field for what's been happening recently. So look forward to that, and I'll see you next time.